Hi, welcome. My name is Paul Mazuka, and this is Advanced Placement U.S. History. And today we're going to do a review session for Chapter 16, really the back half of the 1850s. In class, we've been starting with 1850 with the compromise that kind of sets off the fiery 1850s. And we worked nicely from the compromise of 1850 with the Fugitive Slave Act, California as a free state, to the 1854 Kansas-Nebraska Act, which of course introduces Stephen Douglas to the national level, promoting popular sovereignty, dealing with the idea of the extension of slavery out west, and with popular sovereignty, specifically in the Kansas and Nebraska territory, we are talking about allowing the people to vote if slavery should exist or not. And by doing so, this creates, of course, the birth of the Republican Party, which we've talked about in class. So we got to elect today President James Buchanan in 1856 as the 15th President of the United States, Democrat, 1857 to 1861. And he's a guy that, even though he's from Pennsylvania, he's going to be he'll be seeking his support from the Southern slave-owning Democrats. So typically, he will be inclined to promote laws or bills or acts, what have you, that of course will endear himself to the Southern slave owner. Boo, hiss, we don't like you. Where's John Brown when we need him? So, 1857, we talked about three events that was pivotal to the divisive nature of one James Buchanan. So, to recap the Dred Scott case, 1857, Scott v. Sanford. Dred Scott was a slave that was property of an army surgeon who bebop and scattered, yeah, Jenna, scattered all over the United States. So he's lived in free territories, lived in slave states. Anyway, the army surgeon passed on, and Dred, even though he's in Missouri, has believed that he's lived in free territory, therefore he shall be free. The Missouri Supreme Court agrees with him after the army surgeon's brother tried to acquire Dred as property. Dred said he should be free since he lived in free territory, and he then takes the court or case to the Missouri Supreme Court. And the Missouri Supreme Court says absolutely he is free. However, on appeal, upon further review, we're going to go to the Booth on this. Not Abelman v. Booth. We'll get there in 1859, but we're going to talk about the Supreme Court of the United States. And Chief Justice Roger B. Taney basically says two main things: that it's detrimental to the anti-slavery movement, to all pro-slavery forces. This will be the court case that you will hang your hat on. So basically, two things. One, Dred, you're a slave, so you're not a citizen. Therefore, hence, you cannot take court or cases to court because the U.S. court system is indeed for U.S. citizens. So, Dred, unfortunately, you will remain a slave. And two, Taney goes on to promote the idea that Congress does not have the ability, does not have the constitutional authority to deny slavery anywhere, and therefore taking the Missouri Compromise and saying any congressional action like that is unconstitutional. So therefore saying slavery can't exist anywhere in the United States. So this goes above and beyond Douglas's popular sovereignty, which lets the people decide, oh, what do I do? What do I do? You know what? Nothing. Because according to Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, slavery can't exist anywhere. And as I said before in class, Buchanan knew the decision before it was made public, and he encouraged Americans to endorse the Dred Scott decision, thereby aligning himself with the Southern slave owner. in the Southern Democrats in Congress. So the second major thing in 1857 we were going to call the panic. In this panic of 1857, which typically unemployment, low land values, low prices, deflated value. This is also a very sectional issue, where you see this panic caused by high wheat prices in the north, a lack of protective tariff for northern industry, and so the panic of 1857 is really north against south, and the northern industrial giants are asking Buchanan for for a protective tariff. However, he is very hesitant on any high tariff, much to the chagrin of the Northerners. And in contrast, this is a feather in the cap of the Southerners, saying that cotton is king, and that our way of life, that our economic way of life, is far superior to the ups and downs of the capitalist Northern society based upon industry. So the Southerners are feeling a little puffy-chested about this one, because they feel that their way of life is far superior. And of course, Buchanan is aligning himself with the South on that. And the third thing, Dred Scott, Panic of '57, and the Lecompton Constitution. So this proposed Lecompton, and we're not talking straight out of Lecompton in Los Angeles, we're talking straight out of Lecompton in Kansas, which this proposed constitution said that Kansas will be a slave state. And Buchanan's like, okay, here, oh my God, slave state, Kansas, Lecompton, accept it, book it, follow it, take it. But no, the pro-slavery faction of Kansas was actually quite wee, and the anti-slavery faction of Kansas voted, no, this is not the Constitution that's going to represent us. But again, Buchanan endorses Lecompton, accepts Lecompton as the legit Constitution of Kansas, promotes it, and again, further divides the nation on this issue. Side note, Kansas, of course, never becomes a slave state. It will become a free state, right? So, 1858. The Lincoln-Douglas debates. All right, so for the Illinois seat, for a seat in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate from Illinois, there's an opening. Lincoln, the tall Lincoln, he's up here, he's like 6'4", and here we have little Stephen Douglas, all polished and manny and petty, but you can't see my feet. He's polished, he's wealthy, he dresses to the nines, he's all, hello, I'm Stephen Douglas. Popular sovereignty, you may remember me from such legislation as Kansas-Nebraska Act, as Compromise of 1850. I'm going to be your next senator. I'm going to be your next president of the United States. And then Lincoln, with his Lincoln ways, all goofy and gangly and awkward, but brilliant. He delivers. He goes toe-to-toe with Douglas, and even though Douglas wins the senatorial election of '58, Lincoln catapults himself to the possibility of a Republican nomination in 1860. Two main things from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. One was the Freeport Doctrine, which basically Douglas is saying, he's kind of backtracking on popular sovereignty. He basically says, look, even though if the state votes for slavery, certain parts of the state, certain cities, it's up to those local towns to enforce it or not. So if they don't want to enforce it, guess what? Slavery won't be included in those areas, which is a complete balderdash and hoo-ha, and Lincoln calls him on it. And Lincoln basically delivers his house divided speech. A house divided cannot stand. We can't have half slave and half free. That house will not stand. He basically calls out Douglas because of the Freeport Doctrine, and he basically gets Douglas to acknowledge that the popular sovereignty really is a ruse, a cunning attempt to trick to get what he wants. But in 1858, Douglas does win the senatorial election, and will represent Illinois in the U.S. Senate. 1859, Abelman v. Booth. It's the next thing on our timeline. And Abelman v. Booth. Booth is a Milwaukee newspaper editor who's harboring an escaped slave, a fugitive, if you will. And the U.S. Marshal demanded the release of the slave under the guidance of the Federal Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. And the guy refused to turn him over. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court threw out the case. Say, we are not going to prosecute this guy for harboring this slave because we find the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional, and therefore they were not going to obey federal law. So the tables have turned. Now the northern states are going to disobey the federal law. Well, the Supreme Court of the United States basically overturns Wisconsin and says, the fugitive slave law is constitutional, but Wisconsin, being Wisconsin, still refused to comply with the federal government. So again, we are at a breaking point. This House divided that Lincoln's talking about. It's oh no, it's not going to stand. So the storm's on the horizon, and in June of 1859, John Brown is scheming to. Let's see, he's getting a few of his sons together, he's working with former slaves, and his plan is to raid the federal arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, which technically today would be West Virginia, but the state West Virginia has not been created yet. And so their scheme was, and the scheme's going to be hatched in October of 59, and so they are going to attack the federal arsenal and give out weapons to slaves, and slaves are going to shoot their masters in the face, and they're going to be free. And everyone's happy. However, the Marines were tipped off, and he's caught, and he's tried, and he's executed for this treason activity. Northerners view Brown as a saint. Southerners saw this as abolitionist propaganda, and they vilify him. But he's sort of like the cause, which kind of gets us to 1860 election. The Southern Democrats go with John C. Breckinridge. Northern Democrats go with Stephen Douglas. There's a Constitutional Union Party goes with John Bell, and the Republicans go with Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln's ticket is basically running on: we are against the extension of slavery. I am not an abolitionist. And he gets 180 electoral votes. And he gets 59% electoral votes. He's our 16th president of the United States. And because of this, Republican in the White House, South Carolina secedes in December of 1860. And James Buchanan basically says, I don't have the constitutional authority to address this situation. Where's Andrew Jackson when we need him? And this will take us into Chapter 17, the Civil War.